Can you hear me now?
Yeah, hi, bro. I can hear you now.
Okay, hang on.
Although your video is not on yet.
Yes. Hold on. Why is it not? It is saying that you have stopped it.
Oh, okay. Let me make you a host.
Is it working yet?
Yeah, since I made you a co-host, so I think you should be able to turn it on now.
Yeah, there you go.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. So let me just try to share my screen.
Okay.
Can you see that?
Oh yeah, it's beautiful. I can see it.
Okay. All right. I'm just going to run up to my bedroom to get something, and then I will be right back.
Okay, that's right.
Okay. But yeah, we are ready to rumble. I think I have everything. So give me.
Welcome back.
Hi, but I'm not seeing my. Let me see. There you go. Okay, I wasn't seeing or hearing you before.
Yeah. So we're gonna
So
have.
How many people you have registered?
You know what?
Did you hear me?
No, I didn't hear you. What did you say?
I said how many people you were able to get registered?
Yeah, so I think we have over 100 people registered. And then usually we get about half of that who eventually show up.
How many people you said?
We have 100 people, about 100 people.
Okay.
Yeah, so,
Okay.
yeah, so hopefully I think we should be expecting about half of that. The
Okay.
others get the video recordings.
Okay, I'm just changing the lighting in here. I feel like I am a YouTuber by profession because I have all this lighting now because
Yeah,
I'm doing so many videos.
Lightning is good.
What's that?
Yeah, lightning is good. I think we already have some of them on the call. Some of them are already showing
Okay.
up. Yeah. So,
Okay, yes. I think we already have some folks. Yes, we have 5 folks on here.
Yeah. Life. So I'm communicating with some people on WhatsApp.
Just a little more time. So how many have you done so far? Me, Blessing. How many of these?
8.
8.
Yeah, I've done 8. We've done
And how
8.
many more to go?
Yeah, so it's going to be a continuous journey. So it's a community of people who who are learning, who want to increase their skills. So since learning never ends, we're going to make sure like this continues. Maybe once a week, once in 2 weeks. Just to keep this thing going. Something like that.
Good. And are your participants mainly in Nigeria, or are they across the globe?
Yeah, mainly Nigeria, and they are mostly entrepreneurs, software developers. Some of them are working for the government in Nigeria, and that's just how it's kind of structured. Just a moment. Just a moment.
Hello, everyone. We are just waiting on a few more participants to join us. If you just joined us, welcome.
From here. do you have any questions for me before we start?
No, so basically, I'm going to go over the PowerPoint, give examples, and then we stop and we have a Q&A for what, about half an hour, 15 minutes? What is your thinking?
Okay, okay, we can do that. We can do that. So we'll go through the presentations, then we'll then start taking questions and answers.
Okay.
Okay, no problem. So I think we just give 1 or 2 more minutes, and then we'll start.
And I did have some folks from Trinidad joining us. I shared the,
nice.
I shared the, yeah, with some Trinidadians, a friend of mine. So I think we should have some Trinis in the house.
Oh, nice. That's so cool. That is so cool.
I'm trying to get my AirPods to work, but they say that it's connected, but I can't.
Okay, what's that?
My AirPods, I don't know why. It says it's connected, but it's not. I'm not hearing you through it. I'm still hearing you through my speakers.
Okay, just wait.
Okay, I'm hearing you now.
Yeah?
Yes, I can hear you now because the whole household is asleep. So it's 6 o'clock at my time. So that's what I wanted to hear you in my ears instead of through the.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so okay, well, let's see. Awesome. Okay, I think we can start.
Go ahead and start.
Yeah. I think we can
Okay.
start.
So how do you do it? Do you introduce me? Do I just introduce myself? What would you like?
I'm going to introduce you, and then you would also talk about yourself, and then we'll start.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah. So everybody, welcome to today's class. On our class today, we have Professor Dr. Sacha Joseph Mathews, who I've known for years now. Prof is a guru with marketing, and she's really good with it. And she also consults for a number of organizations beyond teaching. And so I first met Prof. Prof, that was 5 years ago.
I think it might be longer than that. I think
like,
longer than that, actually.
Yeah, almost 7 years. Oh my God.
Yeah, yeah.
And you know, we've been in touch, which is a very good thing. And so today, Prof is here to share with us her knowledge and her wisdom. And she would also be taking questions from you guys. So let's give it up for Professor Sacha.
Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I was so excited and really honored that Blessing would ask me to do this. So my name is Dr. Sacha Joseph Mathews. I'm a professor of marketing and international business at University of the Pacific, which is located in Stockton, California. But I'm sure as you can hear, this is not a California accent that I have. So I am from the wonderful little island of Trinidad and Tobago. So I shared this with some of my Trinidadian colleagues. And so I think I have some friends from Trinidad on the call. Hopefully, at least they were able to join us. So today, I have worked with Blessing and a number of other nonprofits, for-profits, small businesses, large businesses, kind of helping everyone with strategic marketing and understanding the consumer and positioning themselves. So today we're going to talk about marketing in extraordinary times, because I think everyone can appreciate that we are truly in extraordinary times, and it is going to be quite the journey for us to get back on track once we reopen up our businesses and so forth and so on. So I always start off a lot of my presentations like this, right? There are three types of companies out there: the ones that make things happen, the ones that look on at things happening, and the ones that wonder what the heck just happened. And I think we want to make sure we are not the latter, right? We want to make sure that we're not looking on as things are happening to us and around us, and we are not the initiators of things and the initiators of change. But I also want to dispel this ideology and this concept, this myth that marketing is just advertising, it's just promotions, it's all gimmicks. Because in fact, we know that marketing is deeper. Marketing, in fact, is the most central, I always tell everyone, is the most central of all of the business functions, and I'll explain in a little bit. But marketing really has to start with the consumer. I think in the past, we all had this idea that you build it and you build it well and they will come. And I think this just is fictional. We know if someone has the best product in the world, the most amazing product, the best built product, the best engineered product, but no one knows about it, they're not going to have sales. And so at the core of all of the functions, I tell my accountants, you're not going to have any money to count if no one is buying your product. I tell my HR managers, you're not going to have any employees to manage, to help if no one's buying any product. You're not going to have any projections and any finance arrangements to make if nobody's buying any product, right? And so at the end of the day, marketing is your key function, and it must be strategic. So a lot of people are familiar with the 4 Ps. I think everybody knows the 4 Ps: product, place, price, and promotion. And you see, I have them as our pillars, right? Product, place, price, and promotion. But I have created this slide based on some data, but mainly based on my experiences with small businesses, large businesses for the last 20 years. And I can tell you, it is way more than the 4 Ps. And so I've kind of choreographed this entire talk today around these ideas. And at the core of all of these are people. And you can, the people can be the employees, the people can be the customers, the people can be the stakeholders, clients, however you want to call them. But at the end of the day, people are central to your marketing initiative. So we're going to talk about what your priorities are and how they come through. We're going to talk about the physical space and how that makes a difference. We're going to talk about brand personality, and we're going to talk about processes. But at the end of the day, it all comes back to people. So I think for me, the biggest challenge I see with small businesses and large businesses alike, the difference with large businesses is that sometimes they're a little bit more sophisticated in understanding their customers. They've had a little bit more help. But I think the number one problem when I speak to small businesses is they say, oh, when I ask them who their customer is, their understanding of their customer is way too broad. So you need to really collapse and really distill who your customer is. You have to know who your customer is on an intimate level. And sometimes I will speak to folks and they will say, all women, that's my customers. Your customers could never be all women, because you could never reach all women. You could never reach all women across the globe through a marketing campaign. So your goal always has to be to distill your customer. Is it short women, tall women, women of a particular age, women of a particular background, they live in a particular geographic region, women in a particular profession, or women of a particular income bracket, women who have a particular hobby, or women who engage in certain activities at certain times of day, or women who drive along this space. Whatever it is, you cannot reach all women. So you have to, and you can never know the needs of all women. So you have to understand from a customer point of view, you have to be intimate. What is it that who your customers are, first of all? What is that profile? Then what is the need that they have? Who has that need? And you need to be able to verbalize that in 5 minutes or less. It's the elevator pitch. You have to know who your customers are intimately and be able to describe it. And you also have to know and understand how your organization is able to meet the need that you think your customer has beyond what the competition is doing. So ask yourself, what do I know about my customer? And then this is a big one as well. How often do I check in with my customer to get a sense of if their needs have evolved, have changed, have really moved from what it was when I first started my business to what it is today? Or sometimes we have different sets of customers. Are the needs the same with those customer segments? You gotta, this is the other big problem I think a lot of companies have. Either they don't do enough research, or they have the data, but they don't make decisions based on the data. So you have to know what it is that your customers want. And you have to know how you know that, right? It cannot be speculation. It can't be, well, historically. It has to be, well, we have spoken to our customers in the last 6 months. We've done a temperature test, and we know this because XYZ. So you have to use science to understand your data. And I can't tell you how many people across the globe, when I'm working with organizations, will say to me, yeah, we know our customers. And I would say, how do you know your customers? And they'll say, well, ever so often we get feedback, 1 or 2 people. That's not your customer base. Getting feedback, even from your biggest customers, doesn't mean that you are intimate with your customer base. And I think it's so important that you have an intimate understanding of who your customer is. All right. So we're switching to the first of our 4 Ps. And let's start off with product. And I think here it's important to recognize, I use product loosely, right? Because we're talking really about either a product or a service. And I like to break down the product from these 3 perspectives, because I think a lot of times when we are thinking of product as the business, we are thinking of the actual product, right? We're thinking of brand name, different features that we may have in our product or service, how we've designed it, how we've packaged it. But I do want you to recognize that at its core, all the products in your category are the same. Whether I am driving a BMW or a Ford or a Jaguar or an Audi, at the end of the day, all of those products get me from point A to point B. And that's the core benefit. So a lot of times we might think, well, I'm not really in a category with those folks because I am, yeah, perhaps. But at the end of the day, all products have a core benefit. And all of the products in your category will have this core benefit. And so it puts you in a situation where ideally you can compete against other products with your core benefit. You just have to think about, well, what is the positioning? What is it that I have to come up with that will allow me to differentiate myself from that competitor who has the same core benefit? And then you have to think about the actual product, brand name, features, design, packaging, quality level. And what I always say is, you have to figure out where your sweet spot is here. Because you cannot compete with everyone in that space on all of these dimensions, right? So maybe you have a brand name, and maybe your brand name is very identifiable and very unique. But are all of your features unique? Is your design unique? Is your packaging unique? What is your quality level? And I am suggesting you don't need to have uniqueness every step of the way, right? But what you do need to know, what you do need to have is a clear understanding of where your sweet spot is. What is it that customers are coming to you and expecting when it comes to features? What is it they're coming to you and expecting when it comes to design? How do they identify your packaging compared to the competitor? And whether we're talking actual product or augmented product, and by the way, the further out we go, the more value add we have, right? So if I am able to offer after sales service, I'm able to offer warranties, I'm able to offer delivery and credit, that creates a situation where I'm able to go into a higher price point. So when you are thinking about your product, we want to think about our product in a very broad way. We don't just want to restrict ourselves to thinking from an actual product, but go beyond. Often when I speak to small businesses, I will say to them, so what differentiates you? And they're going to say probably something that's features. And I'm going to say, well, why just limit it to that? Why not take it to the next level? How can the way that you deliver your product distinguish yourself? How can your warranty or how you install or your after sales service distinguish you from the competition? Because far too often, you know, a shoe is a shoe is a shoe. A running shoe is a running shoe is a running shoe. You know, any kind of service has 5, 10, 15, 20, 100 substitutes. But when the customer is thinking about substituting you or your product, what must they stop and ponder? Must they say, man, you know, I want to go buy a car from somewhere else, but I'm not going to get the same service that I would get there. Or I want to go get my cupcakes from these other people, but it just, that frosting doesn't taste the same. There has to be something that differentiates you, and you have all of this range to work with. So think of what defines, and a lot of times this is another weak spot, because I will talk to, I'll talk to companies and they will say to me, oh, you know, we are so different from the competition. And we, like I was working with this one small business and they said to me, well, they're actually a nonprofit and they help children, but they help the children of incarcerated individuals. And so we were talking about how they could expand their donor base. And I said, well, what will make someone donate to your cause versus another cause? And they said, well, we help children, but only children of incarcerated individuals. So no one is like us. And I say, if someone is thinking of giving to your cause, they are not only giving to people who help the children of incarcerated individuals. They probably are giving to children, or they are funding educational programs. And so the fact that you only cater to the children of incarcerated individuals is important for you to know. But that in itself is not unique enough for your donor to only give to you. So you have to understand who your consumer is, whether that's a donor or a product or a buyer, a client, however, a patient. You have to understand versus what the competition does. How does your consumer define your product? What do they come to you specifically for? What do you do best? And then on top of that, how have you then innovated in the last 5 years? You know, what are you doing now that you didn't do before that has really resonated with your client base? And very important, what is the competition doing better than you? I think we always underestimate that. What is the competition doing better than you? So when we think, the other thing that I think often sometimes might escape us is this notion of, okay, so I know what my product is and I have a particular clientele, but there are different strategies depending on whether we have a new product or an existing product, whether we're going into a new market or an existing market, if it's a new product, a new market. So I put this up here because, you know, if I'm talking to, I'm working with this entrepreneur in Trinidad, and she just launched a line of skincare products. So she owns a bra fitting service, and she both manufactures bras and fits people's for bras that she bought from another manufacturer. But now she's going into this new area of skincare. So she is going to have one strategy for this new product that targets her existing clientele, but she has to have a completely different strategy for this new product that is going after a whole new market, because it is not making sense that you would have the same strategy for all of the categories. So when we're thinking of an existing market and we have an existing product, we're doing market penetration, we're thinking how we can get our existing consumers to buy more. So by the way, this is an Apple strategy, right? Apple is constantly trying to get their, what my students tell me is that, Professor, I'm so deep into iLife now, I can't switch. Because the idea is that you are buying, everything you have is Apple. If you are going to have a phone, you need an iPhone. If you want a computer, then you consider Mac first. If you're going to get something for your home, then you want the home hub. So this is the strategy of Apple, that I will get all of my existing clients to buy more Apple and more Apple and more Apple. And so when they come up with a new product, they go for their existing clients first. But then they also look at, how can I get people to switch? Now, Samsung often will go for new products to new markets. So they came out with a bunch of ads trying to show Apple users why they should switch to Samsung. Samsung users know about all those features. So that they came up with an entire campaign aimed at a new product in the market when they were launching one of their new phones, focused on a new market, which were Apple consumers. So I just want people to really think about that, because a lot of times I find that people will use strategies that are not suitable to the markets that they're working in. The other part of that is to make, have an understanding of when I need to stop producing a product, or when I need to switch a service. So this slide really kind of, is the basic fundamentals of marketing, but this slide speaks to your product relative to growth, relative to market share. So a lot of times, products can start in the door category, but not necessarily. Sometimes maybe you are growing really, really fast, but you don't have a lot of market share. So I just started something, everybody's really interested in it. People are hearing about it, people are excited about it, but I only have a small amount of market right now. If you are able to really to get a lot of market, to be growing high at a fast rate, then you're a star. We love to be in the star category. The problem is, to be and maintain star status is very expensive. It's going to cost a lot of money to keep your product in the minds of the consumer so consistently, to be growing fast, to maintain high market share, to fend off the competition. That's kind of hard. In fact, that is very hard. So what I often say is that you have to think about, who your audience is, and how can what are my resources that will allow me to keep growing, and be cognizant of that. Sometimes companies will have a situation where they're not growing anymore, but they still are in a major, they still have a major amount of market share. And for those kinds of situations, then we know that's a cash cow. So we want to milk that cash cow, right? We want to make sure that we fend off the competition. We're not growing very fast anymore, but we want to maintain market share, because that's going to allow us to have the sales that we want to have. So, sorry, we have a little bit of a glitch here. Good. So let's talk a little bit about priorities. We're switching from product, because one of the things that I think often companies lose their focus on is how everything is syncing up. So I give you an example of two organizations that are really good at this. And I see someone has raised their hands. So I'm going to let that person ask a question in the middle of it. Blessing, can we stop for questions in the middle as people raise their hands, or are we going to wait to the Q&A?
It depends on you. Usually we prefer to wait for the Q&A, but if someone has a question, that's okay. So I will unmute.
That's okay. We could take a little pause and answer some questions.
Okay. Let me bring you up now. Just hold on. Okay. Okay. Can you hear us? Okay, she'll be joining us now as a panelist.
Because I think I saw a question, but I wasn't able to see who asked the question, but I know I saw a hand raised in the middle of it.
Yeah, I think she will become. I don't know. She's not yet.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll continue, and then she can hold on to that question for the end. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So, in priorities, what do I mean by priorities? So, two companies that I think really demonstrate this well: Patagonia, Whole Foods, and so. We're going to get to some examples of small businesses as well. But why do I pick those two brands? Because they prioritize people and the planet. They prioritize sustainability. They prioritize using the best materials that also help the earth. And that comes true in everything they do. It comes true in their product choices. It comes true in what the stores and the spaces look like. It comes true in how they decide to market their product. It comes true in who they hire, how they, their initiatives for their employees, how they handle human resources. So when we think of priorities, I think this is so important that your organization must scream its priorities through all of the P's, through product, place, price, and promotion. It must say who you are at your core. And I think in order to know and understand your priorities, you have to do strategic planning. So far too often, companies are not communicating this very clearly to their consumers. And, I was just working with a small business, and they do tours across the globe. And I said to them, well, what's your priority? And they said, well, sustainability. Our tours are very different. They're operating in Colombia. And they said, well, our tours are very different. And so I'm asking the team, I had a bunch of students assigned to them. Every year I do some projects with companies across the globe, and I assign students to them, and we walk through and give them some assistance. And I said, well, how are you all operationalizing that priority? If you do sustainable tours in Colombia, then that's different from any other tour that anybody else is offering. How do your sustainable tours, how do you communicate that? Because right now, when I look at your marketing, it's just telling me you do tours. It's not saying that you are a sustainable tour operator in anything. It must scream your priorities. When I speak to you as a tour guide, that must come through. When I look at your materials, that must come through. And so that was a huge part of what I want to see. And in order for you to be clear on your priorities, you have to engage in strategic planning. And so the three pillars of that are going to be resources, capabilities, goals, and market opportunities. And I break it down like this, and I'm not going to get in strategic planning, that we could spend days with that. But I just wanted to say that because I think a lot of times people will say, well, this is the new opportunity in the market. We want to go after it. That doesn't make any sense, because you can't just follow what the market is calling for without having an understanding what is it that you are wanting to accomplish, and what resources and capabilities you have to accomplish this. You have to consider who I am as an organization, what resources I have, and then given what I want to accomplish, who I am and the resources I have, what is the market calling for me to do? And so that speaks to the priorities piece of what you're doing. Remember, you get what you reward. So when you are rewarding your employees based on certain dimensions, then they respond to that, right? If you're rewarding them based on commission, then they're going to go after an aggressive sell. So the idea is that you always have to think about, you always have to think about what is it that you are prioritizing? How is that thing that I am prioritizing, how is that coming through in what I am about? How is my mission and vision being enforced on a daily basis? How is it coming through in all of my products? How is it coming through in how my employees approach the customer? How is it coming through in my space? So I feel like the priorities piece is often kind of misunderstood. It is, and before I go into the next one, I just want to spend a little bit of time, because I think particularly when you're a social entrepreneur, And I know that Blessing talked about the fact that we have all kinds of folks on here, right? We have government, we have small businesses, we have social entrepreneurs, we have large for-profit organizations, we have nonprofit. I want my priority to come through. So I work for a university, and we're a private university, and I always say, in everything that I do, I must be student-centered. So how do we set up our student services? If a student is coming to the registrar and a student has a challenge and they need something help, they need some kind of help, everything we do must be student-centered. We cannot advertise that we are student-centered and then to get anything done in the registrar's office is convoluted and difficult, and we are rigid and we're not flexible. We can't say we're student-centered, and as professors, we're not personal. We don't want to see and talk to students outside of office hours. We're very rigid in how we grade and how we organize our classes. That makes zero sense for our mission and our vision. If we are going to charge a premium for education, then we must behave as if we are charging a premium. I tell my colleagues, listen guys, the cost of our education at Pacific, at my university, is on a yearly basis as if people are buying a high-end luxury car. I said, so think as if every year you're trying to convince these people to buy a high-end Tesla. And if that's the case, then you have to think about what's involved in that process. So everything, if you have priorities, they have to follow through on all that you do. I think that's so important. And stemming from that is this idea of place. So now, when we talk of place, and I just picked, this is like your typical, what we call value add or supply chain. And I just use a flat supply chain. There are many versions of what your supply chain can look like. But when I'm thinking of place, so place considers kind of three components. This is one here where we're looking at the supply chains, right? So we're looking at where we get our raw materials, who's our supplier, how we manufacture, distribute, retail, customer, etc. This is if you have a product. But if you have a service, you may have some aspect of this. It may look a little bit different. Maybe you don't have supplies that feed into a raw tangible product. Maybe if you're accounting services, for example, but you still have suppliers because you still have people who have to, you have to get paper, you have a computer supplier, you have software suppliers, et cetera, et cetera. But when we are thinking of place, and that's one component. Another component with place, and that's becoming very, very relevant now, is this idea of how I reach the consumer. So even if I'm a retailer, how am I retailing? Am I retailing via the internet? Am I retailing via catalog? Am I retailing via actual physical brick and mortar space? Am I retailing via the phone? Am I retailing via door-to-door spaces? So I have to understand how I am retailing. So that's the other part of the piece. But then place also speaks to the physical environment, and we're going to talk about that because we're going to talk about that separately. That's one of the other P's. And so I think, again, when we speak about priorities, how is that coming through in your place? And people may say, how is this marketing? This is 100% marketing, because when I am, let's use a basic product we could all relate to. Let's say we are thinking about a car. If I have a high-end car, I cannot use low-end components in my car, because very quickly my consumers will figure out this is not a high-end car, right? So I have to make sure that I pick the best people to supply the speakers. I pick the best people to supply the leather of the interior. I pick the best components for the radio and the dashboard and the AC. Similarly, if I am working with a low-end product, people expect that it is coming at a particular price point, and therefore they are not expecting that they are going to get the creme de la creme in terms of the supply chain. So it matters because it matters for positioning. But also, as we speak about priorities, if I have particular priorities, and let's go back again, if I'm focused on sustainability, or let me use my colleague Nicole with the bra fitting example again. If it is that Nicole has a bra fitting business and she is so, she's going after a high-end clientele, then she cannot use low-end products. Her raw materials, her suppliers have to be at the highest quality, or she's going to get huge pushback from her consumers. And so we have to recognize the supply chain plays a major part in the marketing component, a major, major part. So then we move to the idea of physical space. And I think the physical space piece is also very, very important. This is an area that I have studied intensely, and we know physical spaces matter. And we're using physical spaces in a very general way here. And what do I mean by that? So a lot of the literature and a lot of the research will say physical spaces, as we talk about the physical environment, we're talking about three things, right? We're talking about design and layout, we're talking about ambience, and we're talking about social. So I'm going to break them down and explain to you how this is marketing. Design and layout. Have you ever walked into a space, and it doesn't matter if it's an office, if it's a supermarket, if it is a mall, if it's a concert place, you walk in and the space turns you off, or you say, oh my God, for what I paid, this is not what I was expecting. Or the other side, you say, wow, this is phenomenal. This is so impressive. And we know that when we're talking about physical space, there are two kinds of human emotions, right? On the one hand, you get what we call approach behaviors. So approach behaviors mean that when you're in a physical space that works and a physical space that encourages approach behaviors, you forget how long you've been in there. You lose your sense of time. You become very relaxed. You want to stay longer. You are happy, and you're enjoying the space. On the other hand, if you're in a space that encourages avoidance behaviors, you often will be like, God, I got to get out of this space. I cannot, I can't stay here because this is driving me nuts. This space is too close. I can't wait to get out of this space. And so because of that, we know that there are tons of things that we can do to encourage approach behaviors and to reduce avoidance behaviors. And if that's not marketing, I don't know what is. It is no mistake. It is not a coincidence that when you go into a Victoria's Secret space, for example, you are just like, wow, sexy is coming through the very ethos of the space. And they are using every single tool they have to make sure that space screams sexy, okay? So they are looking at that space and they're saying, how is my signage looking? How is my signage screaming sexy? How are the models in the storefront making people feel sexy? How are the design and layout making the space sexy? How am I engaging all of my senses to communicate that? So when we think about spaces, and let's move away from the large scale, big Victoria's Secret, but let's say you're walking into a little retail store. You only have a small space to work with. How are you using your space to communicate your priorities? How are you using your space to encourage approach behaviors? How are you using your space to communicate what your customers need, want, desire from you? So I think it's so important for us to think about space. And so when we're thinking about space, let's think about it in 3 dimensions. So I was working with a small business, a restaurant here in Stockton, and he was losing business. And he was like, I don't know why. Lunchtime, this space should be packed. And I went into the space and I said, at lunchtime, he's like, people come for dinner all the time, but for lunchtime, I can't get people to come. The space is so congested. His audience doesn't have a lot of time. So they want to come in, order, eat, and get out. His space was so congested. It did not flow well. People felt as if because it didn't flow well, it was so confusing when they were in there to order. They just didn't feel as if, and it took longer. And so because of that, he was really shooting himself in the foot. He was making a space, creating a space that people will, when they got into that space, despite the fact that they enjoyed the food, they were thinking avoidance, avoidance, avoidance. And so we have to think about where are things located in the space. How is both in terms of actual location and then proximity. So the bar is here. Where do people order? Where do people pick up versus where they order? How can they see the menu? Where do they sit? How is this flowing? What comes first? What comes next? And what is the flow between what comes first and what comes next? So even things like, I was helping a small ophthalmologist, and in his practice, he was saying people are not buying, people come to me, but then I also have optometry in addition to ophthalmology. I want people to buy glasses, but they somehow don't see, well, where the glasses were located, his display was too far away. And so people weren't passing this. It's no coincidence that when you go to major tourist attractions, you finish your tour in the gift store, right? It's not a coincidence. It's where they intentionally want you to finish your tour in the gift store because you're going to buy stuff. So you have to think about your priorities as you're putting up the space. And then you have to think ambience. How am I creating a space that people are going to enjoy? Temperature, wall color, carpeting or flooring, signage, all of these things. What are stimulating the five senses in my space? That is a huge part of marketing. And whether we're doing concerts or we're doing seminars or we're doing a retail format, you have to think about ambience. The last of the physical components, and this might actually be the most important, is the social engagement in your space, right? And that social engagement comes in three ways: employee to employee, employee to customer, customer to customer. I can't tell you how many small businesses think, oh, marketing is just employee to customer. Absolutely not. And particularly when you have a service, this elevates it even more. But let's think about this. Let's unpack it a little bit. Employee to customer interaction clearly is important, right? So you want to train your employees how to speak to customers and so forth and so on. And in a government perspective and non-profit, this becomes critical because I think a lot of times in a corporate for-profit space, people understand very clearly the value of the customer and know that they have to watch their interactions with the customer. But often when we're talking about in a governmental space, that there is a huge disconnect between my customer and how that pertains to my employment or how I benefit from that. So I think you really have to do more enforcement. And what I often say to when I'm training government employees, I say to them, listen, we know when people feel more confident about government services, they feel more confident about the government overall and the political system. And, when that flows well, the entire country functions better when government functions better. And so we have to always consider, how do we want our organization to be perceived? How do we want our country, our nation to be perceived? And so this is something I think that really needs a lot of work in the government sector. But I think there's a myth that only the employee to customer interaction is going to dictate this. When we're talking about employee to employee, I went into my daughter's school, and as I walked into the front office, here were two teachers bad talking another teacher. Immediately my perception of the entire organization plummets, because I'm like, what kind of organization this place is where these two teachers feel that in the auditorium, in the entrance part of the school, they will be discussing another teacher that speaks to professionalism, that speaks to etiquette. How much of that behavior is pervasive through how they conduct a classroom, how they conduct meetings? Is there a sense of professionalism? So that's the employee to employee. They weren't speaking to me, the customer, but just monitoring that was important. Then what if you go into a space and two customers are having a bad interaction? then that also it affects how you feel in that space. And the way management deals with it, the way the organization deals with it, is also going to affect how you perceive the organization. So I think this issue of physical space is tremendous. One last story before we move on to price. You know, I was in this, I think I went into a bakery, and two customers were getting into it. And then an employee jumped into the mix. And when I saw how that employee spoke to one of those customers, it turned me off completely from the bakery, and I never went back. So I think in addition to understanding customer to customer, employee to employee, employee to customer, we have to understand how two of those interactions being observed by a third party is going to affect how you see it. Because let's say I look on at an employee to customer interaction where I'm not involved with. Maybe the employee was really sweet to me, but they were obnoxious to another customer or another employee. That affects how I perceive the space. That affects how I perceive the organization. So, and that is a marketing piece. We want to have our, in service quality, we talk about empathy, we talk about responsiveness, we talk about assurance, we talk about reliability, and we talk about tangibles. So when I'm thinking about reliability, assurance, and responsiveness, it's not just to me, but it's how I'm seeing you interact with other parties. Good. Okay, so we're moving on to price. And price is the most flexible of all of your 4 Ps, not your 8 Ps, really. When we're thinking about price, we have to recognize rather that, let's say my product is already established. My promotions are already done. I can't change my supply chain, but I can change my price. And you have to be very responsive with the price component of your marketing mix. And then you have to think of what, by responsive, I mean, what are my priorities? What are my goals? How does that blend into how I am pricing my product or my service? Because what I always say is you have to do your homework with price even before. So you have to be, the challenge with price is that you have to be proactive and reactive at the same time. So you have to be proactive and do your homework. And from that, we have to know, what I always say, I think a lot of companies take the position of, okay, these are my costs. And so let me do a markup above my cost, right? And I say that's one approach, and that certainly is a fine approach, but it doesn't take into consideration what the market is doing. So you might say, these are your costs, and you're going to put a 5%, a 10%, a 20%, 100% markup on your costs, and that's what you're going to sell it for. And your competitor is selling it for a third of what you are selling it for. You're not going to sell product. Unless you have a very specific niche that, and you are very, very different from your competitor. But especially if you have a close competitor, that's not going to cut it. Instead, what I want you to do is get a very clear sense of what market pricing is. So what is it that how is the market pricing out this product? And think of close and far competitors, right? Who is pricing their product closely to you? Who's pricing their product very far from you? And that can be very high above or very high below. And then how can you differentiate and distinguish yourself from those price points? And so as you understand that, you're in a better position to say, okay, you know what, based on who I am, what I provide, who my customers are, I think this is what the market will allow me to price at. And then work back from that how you can make some money, okay? Because that may be at a very high level and you're like, no, wow, I only thought I could have a 20% markup. Turns out I could have a 400% markup. Who knew, right? Or it might be, I thought I was going to be able to have a 20% markup, but it looks like there is a price ceiling, meaning customers are just not going to buy above this price point. So I can sell 5 products at that price point, or I can drop my price point a little bit and sell 100. Now, keep in mind, the market evolves, okay? And let's look at, I wanna use cell phone pricing, and Blessing, you can tell me if it is a little bit different with you guys in Nigeria, but cell phone pricing, and I imagine as well from across the globe, price point differs. But when years ago, let's say 10, 15 years ago, when we first started having cell phones were selling at a ridiculous price point, right? Only the very, very wealthy had cell phones. And that worked, but you could never achieve maximum, or what we call optimal market reach at that price point level, right? Because you could only get the rich. Then at some point prices plummeted, right? Prices dropped from over $1,000 for a cell phone to something like $100, $200 US for a cell phone. And at that point, so many people bought cell phones. Now, and then it went to a lot of competition between carriers, and everyone, you could get the best cell phone and you only had to put $200 down. And now that has changed again in the US, where they are once again making you pay for your cell phone, but on a kind of terms, so you don't feel how much you're paying for the cell phones. So the price of the cell phone has remained the same, but how you interact with that price is different. So Blessing, I don't know, you can tell me, is that similar in Nigeria or is that completely different?
Very similar, very similar.
Right.
I think the difference is that over here we don't take loans to buy phones, like it's cash. So it's a cash-based economy.
Right. So you don't even get terms from the retailer.
Yeah. So you go to the retailer. That's Computer Village mostly for people in Lagos, and then you buy the phone cash. Even if it's $1,000, you have to buy it cash. Nobody gives you loan to buy a phone.
To buy phones. Okay. Well, maybe we might get to that point here in the US as well. But I think why are they at that? Why are they coming up with that initiative? Is because they recognize over here in the US, what was happening was no one is going to buy a phone when it is 2,000, not 2,000 US, not in the US. They couldn't get, there is a price ceiling to how much average Joe is going to pay for a phone. And part of that is driven by how many phones are in the market, right? But when you break it down into a mouthful, where a bite size, where, okay, maybe I'm buying this phone for 1,000, but I don't even realize I'm buying it for 1,000 because I'm only paying $24 every month, which I can afford easy. I can't afford 2,000. If you ask me to dish out 2,000, I can't afford it, but I certainly can afford $24.95. And so we have to always think about what is the price ceiling. And then if it is, we can't bring our product down, then what kind of terms, what kind of arrangements can we put in place so that we can make it affordable? The other thing about price, and I have a colleague in Guatemala who was trying to convert a lot of women to use gas stoves instead of charcoal. And her biggest challenge was, she's like, Prof, how do I get people who are buying charcoal for dollars, get them to understand that they will need to buy a tank that will last them 2 weeks or a month for way more, triple, quadruple, 10 times the price. And she had to come up with a system of terms. But what was also interesting is she thought of what would be the incentive. And so she started giving out pressure cookers as an incentive to convert from charcoal to gas. And why did she do that? Because in Guatemala, beans is the #1 staple, and people love their beans, and you are slaving over a stove cooking these beans for hours upon hours, and women value their time. And so they recognize the value of a pressure cooker. And once she explained it to them, they would be willing to go the route. So you also have to think in the price, there's a lot of psychology around pricing. The fact that something is $14.99 and not $15 makes a difference. The fact that I pay for something once a month and then at the end of the year I have it, I could not have had that without paying for it once a month, makes the difference. And I'm going to take a question because I saw there was a hand. So there was a question and I am going to take that question. I don't know, Blessing, if you can unmute that person.
Hi, Gracious.
Can that person, can we hear them?
Gracious, you have a question, right?
No, sir, I don't have.
Okay,
Okay.
So I think maybe that was a mistake again. So
okay, all right, cool. So we'll continue. All right, so when we are thinking about prices, ceiling, but what is the flooring? Also, we recognize the flooring for us, right? So how much do we have to price this at to make any money? And sometimes what is necessary is that we have to adjust where we source our products, right? So we have to adjust where we can get our inputs from. So imagine I am making a type of soap, and if I make this soap with the most pristine products out there, then I would have to sell the soap for a price point that people will not be willing to buy. And so I have to look at alternative options. So I was working with this company out of Costa Rica, and they make sustainable soaps for hotels. So all of their materials, they have to import. And I said to them, how economically viable that is. And they're like, it's not. We can only sell to hotels because our price point is so high. And I said to them, and they said they want to expand to the regular population, but there's no way they can do that. I said, you'll need another line. You'll have to come up with another line that is made from locally sourced products. You cannot use foreign sourced products if you are to sell your product locally, because you have a price floor. You will not be able to make any money if you source your material externally. Then we have to also think about penetration pricing. So penetration pricing has to do with, I know I want to get X amount of market share. And in order to do that, I'm going to have to cut the competition. I'm going to have to lower my price. And keep in mind, penetration pricing is not for everyone, and it's not for forever. So sometimes companies will drop their prices in order to get people to buy their product, and then they'll raise their prices once they think they have a regular clientele who value their product. So let's say I'm starting out in the market, I'm new, I'm opening a bakery brand new, and I'm gonna sell my cakes cheaper and my cupcakes cheaper because I wanna bring people through the door. And once they come in and once I get them, then I can start looking at, well, how can I do incremental? Now, if you raise it overnight, people are like, what the heck, right? And they're not going to want to stay with you. So you have to be strategic about how you raise your pricing. Then you have to think about value pricing. And I think a lot of times bigger companies, as opposed to smaller companies, engage with this. What is the value that my customers have in the market? And you would be amazed at what people value and what people will pay. I had when my parents are now abroad. They live in the US with me, but they have, because of COVID, they were visiting Trinidad, and now they're kind of stuck there because the border is closed. And every time my mom goes to the supermarket, she's like, oh my God, the price of things are unbelievable. I don't understand how, who is buying this? How are you going to buy, mouthwash, for example? So I would pay, let's say, the equivalent of $5 for a bottle of mouthwash. In Trinidad, it was selling for maybe the equivalent of $15, the same bottle of mouthwash. And my mother is like, who's paying $15 for a bottle of mouthwash? And I'm saying Trinidadians. That's who's paying. Because for them, that's the price they're accustomed to. And so Americans coming down, they're not going to buy mouthwash for that price point. But that's not your market. You're not trying to target to Americans coming to Trinidad to shop for mouthwash. That's not who you're targeting. So for my mom, this is insane. Who's paying this? But for other people, they're like, that's the price of mouthwash, right? And so I think a lot of times we have to think about what's the value out there. And for me, sometimes the key here is really getting into the minds of your consumers, because what I may pay money for, my sister may think, why on earth would you pay that? That's such a waste of money, right? And I'm constantly saying to entrepreneurs, think about the value add. Think about how you can create value in the minds of the consumer. Now, I didn't cover this in the slides, but value, there are 3 forms of value. You have functional value, you have hedonic value, and you have social value. So functional value, I think a lot of the times is how we typically would think of value versus of value pricing, right? It's benefits versus cost. What are the benefits that my consumers are getting, and how much does it cost them? And does that flesh out in their minds? But as a business, your job is to create value on several fronts. And when you're able to do that, you're able to up the value proposition, and more likely than not, your consumers are going to say it's worth it. So what are some other forms of value? Social. If this is something that I am engaging with family, or I'm engaging with friends, or when people see me with it, there's a huge social payoff, then that's up. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous how much designers are able to charge for their goods. That's not functional value. I mean, a lot of designers are not even using quality materials anymore, right? They're using plastic, or as we say in Trinidad, pleather. And yet they're able to charge as if they're using leather, as if it is high quality goods. How is this possible? Well, maybe what they like to say, you look at the branding, it's finest man-made materials, right? So they are kind of positioning your product in your mind, and it's not falling apart. It's certainly not falling apart. But nowadays they recognize a lot of people are using this bag for a season. They're not using it for forever. So I no longer need to use real leather, because this is just a fleeting time. Now that makes sense for who their consumers are. And not all companies can do that, right? And so you have to understand, what is the value proposition? How is social value playing a role? And if it is a role, what are people willing to give up for what they get? Or hedonic value. I mean, people pay a lot of money for the strangest things, bungee jumping and jumping out of an airplane. People spend a lot of money to do those things. Personally, I'm not doing it, right? But the idea is they are not thinking about the actual price of what it's worth. How much is, what are the costs involved in bungee jumping? What are the real costs, and then the markup? No, they are thinking about the novelty, the uniqueness of the experience, and that's how they price point it, right? So when you're thinking of value pricing, I think this has the most flexibility and it's the most nuance of all the pricing points, because you have to think about, what kind of value are you offering? Are you offering hedonic? Are you offering social? Are you offering functional? Or are you offering all of the above? And that gives you a sense of what your price point is. And then last but not least is this notion of price skimming. And in price skimming, here we're going to talk about, I'm coming in at the highest possible price, and then I'm going to drop slowly as the market says, yes, Sacha, we're not going to buy it. We're not going to buy it at that price point. And technology does this a lot. They come in as high as possible, and then slowly they come down as competitors come in, as substitutes come in, et cetera, et cetera. So then we're talking about personality. For me, this is such a big one. Right? Because I always want to think about what's my brand personality. And I give you a very simple example. So as a professor, I have a particular brand. People know that I am the only Black professor in the business school. People know that I am very personable. People know that I tell stories when I'm teaching. All of these people know that I'm a hard professor, right? They know that my reputation precedes me. So whatever I am doing, and they know that I am fashion conscious. So students are coming every day to see what shoes I'm wearing, what clothes I'm wearing, all of those things, right? So how is that coming through in my brand, regardless of the format that I'm teaching in? So now that I am teaching online, I'm not going to schlep online and look all crazy and look as if the cat just dragged me in when I'm teaching them. I'm always on point because that's part of my brand. They can't see my shoes anymore, but they can see my face, and I'm not going to teach without the video on because my face is a huge part of my brand. My interaction with people is a huge part of my brand. As I have taught online, I've built in features where I'm constantly checking in with students. I now give out my cell phone. I never did that before, but I have to connect with them. I say, send me a text, shoot me an email, because I want that personal feature to transcend however I'm interacting with them. So when I think of personality, it must come true. When I walk into your store, I must know who your brand is. When I look at your packaging, I must know who your brand is. When I look at your signage, your name, who you choose as a spokesperson, your employees, I must know who your personality is. So everything must come through in terms of your personality. And you have to kind of think about, how are you picking products based on your personality to sell in your, or designing products based on your personality? What is the person, to your personality can also be different or the same to your consumer personality, but sometimes it's different. Like, let me give you an example. So I always joke about, the name is escaping me now. It's a type of motorcycle brand. And this motorcycle brand is known as a rebellious brand, right? So people, Harleys, there you go. Harleys, when people think of a Harley motorcycle, they're thinking of a rebel, they're thinking of leather, they're thinking of long rides and being free from all of the issues with mankind. But when you look at who buys a Harley Davidson, it is 100% older folks, not younger folks. Bald folks, not folks with long flowing hair. Folks that work in an office, not folks that free range. This is completely different from the people who actually buy it. So the brand knows that if they put, a balding accountant driving their Harley on the weekend around the block, that's not going to make anyone buy the brand. So in this instance, right, you have a difference between actual and what we call ideal. But you have to recognize that whoever your personality is must come true in your business model. And so that is critical because that's going to affect how engaged your customers are with your brand, how much they see themselves. So what we know from a marketing point of view is that customers are much more likely to engage with a brand that they think is a reflection of who they are. If I, when I walk into a space and I think, oh my God, they get me, I'm much more likely to buy something in that space. If I am working with a business and I think, I just love how professional they are, I just love the people here, it's a reflection of the brand personality. When you go to some of the best known brands, a huge part of what they do is making sure everyone is on the same page because they need that brand personality to speak in one voice. And I use this as an example. This is one of the best graphics when I'm teaching that I use because I say, okay, these are all of the things that speak to your brand personality, your point of purchase, cash registers, all of these things, the kinds of publicity you do, kinds of sale, your packaging is a huge part of your brand personality. I remember going into a jewelry store, Pandora, and the lady spent at least 10 minutes poofing the paper in the bag that she was, and I said to her, is it really necessary? Is all of this fixing of the paper necessary? She said, absolutely, ma'am. That women who walk around the mall holding a Victoria's Secret bag, even if there is no Victoria's Secret in the bag, feel more sexy than women who do not, right? So you can have lunch in that Victoria's Secret bag, but you're feeling sexy just holding the bag. So packaging is huge. How your marketing, your public relations, special events, media advertising, all of these things. But if they don't work together, the jigsaw puzzle is not making any sense. This is a jigsaw puzzle that is all disconnected. So everything has to work in tandem. You cannot have a schizophrenic brand, right? Your brand must speak with one voice. They must all work together. They must all tell the same story. And so sometimes I will have small entrepreneurs and they will bring their marketing materials to me and I will say, guys, you're a schizophrenic brand. Your brochures look like if they're a different organization than your posters. All of your giveaways look completely different to your website. And and the reason for that is that over the years, they would have had so many different people design their logo that even they design all of their materials. Even their logo looks different from their in each time that it's reproduced. So you remember, you are the holder of that brand. You are the designer of that personality, and everything that you do must tie in. So you have to be crazy about what colors are my logo. You must know that color and you must be aggressive in defending that color. It is pigment. It's pink pigment number 7. You know that. It's not pink pigment number 8 or pink pigment number 2. It's pink pigment number 7. That is the color of pink that you use in your logo, and that is how you have to be reproducing it every single time. And whether you are printing that logo on a bag, on a billboard, or on a sign in your office, it must be the same pink. So whether you're doing special events or you're doing packaging, your brand must scream your personality. That is so important. And it must all come together. And that leads me to the promotion. Boy, this promotion piece is so important. And, I think I always use the example, if you're a country club, you're not going to use a wet t-shirt competition as your promotion, unless you're a certain type of country club, right? So the idea is that the promotions you choose must make sense for your brand personality. Let's use a wedding as a simple example. So what if I got this super fancy invitation, right? I got this fancy invitation. It is embossed, it's all glossy, the writing is formal, and then I get to the wedding and it is all plastic cups and plastic plates in a barn, and it is low key, which is fine. That's great, except that I'm dressed in formal wear to hang out in the barn, right? So your brand personality must come true in all of your promotional materials, and they must be appropriate for your positioning, because you don't want to overpitch, you don't want to undersell, right? So I think it must make sense, but it must also make sense for who your customer is. What is it that they are looking for? What is it that they treasure? What is it that they appreciate? And the little things matter, right? The little things matter because people see themselves reflected in a promotion. And I think a lot of times, a lot of companies don't understand how to choose promotions. So companies will say to me, well, we want to take out a radio. No, we want to take out a newspaper ad. And I said, wait, do you know how much for a newspaper ad? Why would you want to take out a newspaper ad? Who's your target audience? How is it reaching your target audience? Why don't you use Instagram or Facebook? So I am not necessarily a big social media person myself. I don't know when last I posted on Instagram. I only tweet when a company really pisses me off, and then I have to tweet them. But I choose, I'm on Facebook relatively regular, but I can tell you social media is an awesome form of promotion methodology. Why? Because there is no other form of media really that is able to drill down your target market in such a specific way. So social media, I always give the example, if I want left-handed people who shop in the market in Stockton on a Saturday morning, I can find them through social media. I cannot find them through TV. I cannot find them through the newspaper. I certainly cannot find them through radio, but I can find them through social media. And you know what is most credible about that? They would have told Instagram and Facebook that they are left-handed, that they shop at the market on a Saturday morning, and that they want to buy my product, right? All of those things. And Facebook can tell me, okay, these are the people you need to send a message to, and it will appear. So the idea is that you have to, your promotion needs to make sense for your customer. And then, now the alternative. Some customers are not on social media, so why on earth would we use social media to target them? I often say to my small businesses, why did you choose that form of advertising? Well, I like to go, it is irrelevant what you like to do. I had, I always give this other story about a colleague saying he had a client of the Golf Channel. No, he had a client of a supermarket, and the CEO was like, I'm not seeing my ads. I'm paying you all to put the ads on TV, and I'm not seeing the ads. And he said to him, well, what channels are you looking at? He's like, the Golf Channel. He's like, well, why would we put the ads on the Golf Channel? The people who are shopping in your supermarkets do not go, supermarkets don't golf. And that's the thing. I think often we have to think, I always say, do not use the sample of one. The fact that you do something is completely irrelevant unless your customers do it as well. So you have to always think about what promotion makes sense for your customer base. But then what promotion makes sense for the money that you have? If you don't have money to go on TV, why are you trying to stretch yourself to go on TV? Come up with some options that make sense for your budget and who you are and what you are about. Okay, so that takes us to this idea of how are we going to measure our promotions? And my goal is to stop at 7:30, so I'm looking at the time. So I'm making sure that I'm on point. But for me, particularly with small and large businesses are like, this is the same problem. People make decisions about marketing, and they do not make them on sound data. And when they make a decision, first to begin with, they didn't make it on sound data, but on the back end, they have not measured it to see if that was a good decision that they made. So if I choose to go on social media, there are a huge amount of analytics to back up whether or not I made a good decision. If I choose to use radio, then I'm going to include a code in radio that is going to give my customers 5% or 10% discount, because I know every time somebody comes into my store and says, oh, I heard your ad on the radio, and it said if I use this discount, then I get, if I use this code, I get a discount. That's telling me, boom, radio is working. Or similarly, a different one, if I put an ad on Facebook, boom, Facebook is working. You have to track your marketing tools. You have to measure the effectiveness of your promotion. And you can't measure it one time. You have to keep on consistently judging it. You have to know what you're going to measure. So I often tell people, okay, you're going to do this. How are you going to know it's working? And how often you check to see if it's working? And if it's not working, what are you going to do? So often, this is a big one. Companies will tell me, small businesses, I spent $5,000 on an ad. I said, what did you get for it? What's your KPI? What's your return on investment? What's your ROI? What KPIs did you use? What key performance indicators did you use to assess if it was working? Well, I don't know. Somebody told me it would be good to put a billboard up. Okay, well, you can't, that's a waste of money unless you know why you did it, who it's reaching, how effective it was in actually getting people into your front door. You have to track what you're doing. And not only track, but have a benchmark to measure it against. So you do a program on Instagram and you're like, oh, I think people are really into it. I'm getting a lot of, people are really engaged, you're sharing it. Okay, great. So how often are you looking at these numbers? Are you tracking the numbers were at this point yesterday, they're at this point today? And then what's your benchmark that you are looking to judge and say, boom, that's what I needed. I needed them to reach 50 likes. And why do I have this benchmark? Because 5 other organizations similar to me, they are blowing that benchmark away. So this is my conservative benchmark. You need something to judge yourself against. And then the last of my P's, and this is something that I really feel so strongly about, is processes. Because can I tell you, you have an organization that is a really good organization. You have an organization that understands how to promote their product, have a great product, but it takes me forever to get my product. Or when I get in there, the steps to get from point A to point B takes forever. I don't want to do business with that organization. So I want to encourage something. I want to encourage each of the persons on this call to go and do something called blueprinting with your business. So blueprinting is basically you're mapping out every single step your consumer takes as they're engaging with you in your business. If it's a phone call and you have a call center, when that person decides they want to make a call, how do they get your phone number? How do they then dial in and communicate with you? Is it always going to be, is it via chat? Is it via the phone? Once they call, what's the first step? Do they hear automated? Do they have to press 1 for this? Do they have to press 2 for this? How long does it take? What are the background processes that are driving this? Who are they speaking to in the foreground? Who are the contact employees? What support do those contact employees need? What software to support? Go through the entire thing and then look at the gaps. You're going to find some major gaps that you had no idea because you are looking at it constantly from your perspective. But have a friend walk through that process. And this doesn't matter if it's government, if it's nonprofit, if it's for-profit, small business, large business. I do this with my MBAs and small businesses in our local town here. The business is amazed. The students are amazed. You're like, wow, we had no idea this takes so long. We had no idea this is so confusing. One business said, boy, we had no idea that we should move where our menu is because when people come into our store, they are trying to order, but the menu is on the other side where you pick up. We've had congestion for years and we had no idea why that was happening. Now we know. And they only know that because they walk through it from a customer point of view. So you have to look. And now in 2020, guys, what role is tech going to play in this? I think tech is the differentiator beyond. And tech is important, not only because it makes things flow better, but can I tell you, generation, the iGen and millennials think you're a shady organization if you don't have a website. You're shady if you don't have Instagram and are not tweeting them or responding via Facebook. So I think the process part of it is so important. And we have to figure out what role tech can play to really make this process improved. And then we have to constantly evaluate and re-examine and break down and reconstruct our processes. Because I'm working with organizations when I say, when last you all reviewed your processes? They're like, well, if it ain't broke. I'm like, who says it's not broken? Right? You're using the same processes since 1970. There's absolutely no way that's not broken, right? So you have to, I want to review my processes every year, but certainly every other year, because tech changes, people's expectations change. You have to understand how processes play a huge role in your marketing component, because if I go on a website and it's taking too long for me to figure out how to order this thing, I abandon my cart. That's because of process. That's not because they don't have a good product. That's because their processes suck. So you have to think about your processes. And then the last thing is this issue of data. How are you using data? How are you tracking your consumer decision making? How are you tracking what your customers are doing? How are you tracking your success and changes? And then how are you reporting on it? I think in 2020, I want all of my businesses that I'm working with to be using data to make decisions. You know, and I can't say, I did some research in the Caribbean a few years ago, and this is my biggest question to the businesses. And I interviewed small and large businesses, and they're not using enough data to inform their decision making. And a lot of times companies will say, oh, but we are doing fine for now. You're doing fine for now. But you really want to be careful, because just because you're doing fine, and a lot of instances they're doing fine because they're the monopoly. Once, you know, taxi, let me use the example. Taxi guys were doing great until Uber came along. And then Uber shattered taxi services across the globe, not just the United States, the globe. And they all were scrambling because they didn't know how to compete, because their argument was we were doing fine. They thought they were doing fine, but consumers were having all kinds of problems. They never bothered to ask. They never bothered to track reviews. They never bothered to change their services based on the needs and the perspectives of their consumers. So I think it is so important to track your data. And now big data is available everywhere. All kinds of situations, you get big data. You can track. I think at one point in time, CRM, customer relationship management, was all about what are my consumers doing? How can I improve what I offer based on their previous patterns of behavior? Now people are looking at what are consumers everywhere doing? How can I preempt what the norms are to provide a product that everyone's going to love? So I think that's where we are. And boy, you got to be on top of it. You got to do what everybody else is doing and do it better and know what they're doing and know ahead of them. So you got to audit yourself. And you're not auditing from, you know, the perspective of, it's not necessarily an accounting audit, but it is a marketing audit. You have to look at what you're doing, how effective they've been. Should I continue to do this or take a totally different route? And don't wait for forever until you make that change. Don't wait until sales are down or your customers leave you until you make that change. Track your data and be proactive about using it. Because the other problem is I have a ton of companies that track but never use it to make informed decisions, which I think that is a colossal waste of time, because why are you spending the money investing in making these changes, in collecting this data and not using it to make changes? So I'm about to wrap up now. We talked about product, place, price, and promotion. Those are your initial 4 Ps. Then we talked about physical space, priorities, processes, and personality. Those are your second. And then at the core of all of this is our consumer, is our patient, is our client, is our customer. Anything you do has to make sense for who you are and what you're trying to accomplish. And I would also add the resources that you have to accomplish this, right? And lastly, track. Don't make decisions without some kind of informed position. That's all, folks. So Blessing, I think we want to open it up now to questions. I know, you know, wow, can you imagine how fast that time has been? This is like a crash course in marketing.
Yeah.
So let's open it up to see who wants to ask some questions now.
Okay, guys, so I'd like you to drop your questions in the Q&A box. And while you are typing those questions, I'd like you to talk a little bit more about the personality of the brand, because you pointed out about the fact that it's really important to have like some form of cohesion about different aspects of the brand. So for a number of people here who have startups, who have faith-based organizations, NGOs, how do you think they could go about building? How do they identify the personality first, and then how do they kind of bring everything together?
So when I this is a fun one, because when I so I often do an exercise with my students where I say to them, I'm going to do a personality exercise with you. And I want you to think of this brand and think of this brand as a human being. And if this brand was a human being, what would that brand look like? Can I tell you the brands that are best defined? Students can tell me features down to a 5 o'clock shadow. Okay, that is on their bed. That is how detailed. They can tell me height, race, ethnicity, what their hobbies would be, what they look like, male, female. They can give me a ton of information about this person when the brand is very clearly defined. So you want to get together a group of people and say, hey, if my brand was a person, what would my brand look like? And then that will give you a very good sense of, is your brand sophisticated? Is your brand down to earth? Is your brand highfalutin? Is your brand very simple? And then it will also help you understand things about your brand that you're like, wow, I had no idea. And then you can start distilling and getting a sense of, do I want that to be? Because I think brand personality is part of it is how we want to be perceived, but a huge part of it is how are we actually perceived, right? So you can't craft a brand personality unless you know what your current perception of brand personality is. So I would encourage them to have a session with their customers, with their people who engage with them, with their employees, and help them to understand how they think of the brand, because that is going to help them know if they've been effective in the past, or if they have to completely change their direction in the future. Does that help?
Okay, yeah, I think it does. So primarily what you're saying is that they have to first identify a person and define the characteristics of that person, and then use that to choose the different components of.
Right, but remember, the person is a fictional person, right? The person is the brand that we are making into a person. And if we say, so my church, if my church were a person, what would that person be? My church, male or female, tall or short, and then that helps me to get a better sense now of what am I doing well or poorly.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And then secondly, I know there are a number of people on this call who have products, and then they're trying to figure out pricing. And you talked about pricing, for an environment like Nigeria, a lot of people don't like paying for things. Like they want free, free, we call it AWUF, like free stuff, and all that. So how might we begin to work around that,
So pricing, the thing about pricing is really tricky, right? But even in Nigeria, I'm sure not everybody, I'm telling you, liking free stuff is not unique to Nigeria, right? I think people across the globe like free stuff. I mean, you see it even, I used to do a lot of expos, and you're seeing people are coming to your table and they're picking up the stuff that you have at your table. They don't even want the stuff, right? But they just like free stuff. So that's part of the problem. We have our mentality of the gimme gang, as I say in Trinidad. Everybody gimme. What everybody wants something for free. But here's the thing: even in the gimme society and mentality, do you know people pay a lot of money for certain things, right? People pay a lot of money for designer stuff, and in fact, they want you to know how much money that they've paid for it because they think it's worth it, right? And they are happy to pay that money for it. The more, the better, right? They will save up and pay for it. It's amazing to me the kind of money in the developing world that people pay for phones, right? So what I say, the issue is not so much that people don't want to pay for stuff. The issue is people don't want to pay for some things, right? And we have to create the value in the minds of the consumer that make them recognize this is something I'm willing to pay for. And I'm saying value is not just functional, benefits versus cost. Value is hedonic, social. So what is the social payoff for this? What is the hedonic payoff for this? Yes, a lot of times small businesses say, okay, something simple. I have an internet cafe, and maybe people only want to pay a certain amount of money for Wi-Fi. But then I change up what my internet cafe looks like. right? And in my internet cafe, instead of charging you, I don't know, $2 an hour for internet, and all you come in there and you just get internet, I charge you $3 an hour, but now you get, or I charge you $4 an hour, you get unlimited drinks. Right? So you have to think about bundle pricing. You have to think about what is it people buy. Oh, I changed the decor. And so the decor makes it so much more high end that you want to be seen in my internet cafe, right? And so the idea is, how do I create an environment where you value, where I force people to value it? And that is going to allow me a lot of flexibility on my price point.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, we have 2 questions here and 1 here. So we have someone who says that a lot of hospitals don't like paying for software, and then they built like an electronic medical record keeping system for hospitals. How do they get the hospitals? How do they market this software to them? Is it, so like, what do you think?
Tell me that again, because I didn't ask the question. You saying hospitals? I didn't hear you. Tell me that again.
Yeah. So they're saying that they have built an electronic a software for record keeping for hospitals, and a lot of hospitals here in Nigeria are not digitized, right?
Right.
So they still use a lot of papers and stuff like that. So, but they build this beautiful software. And then these guys are not really willing to pay for it, even though it's going to help them a lot. So they're wondering how to go about selling like the software or marketing the software.
Right. Okay. So this is the thing. Behavioral change is huge. It's the most difficult thing, right? So they are selling software that's going to revolutionize these companies, but a lot of these companies are like, I'm operating just fine. Right? So the key is not selling how good the software is, but how difficult their life is without the software. So if you understand right now, it is taking you 10 days to do X. And the fact that you take 10 days to do X is causing all of these additional problems. Is causing a cost in your employment, right? So you have to build your strategy around identifying problems and really talking up how these problems have huge costs associated with these problems. And so your software is going to, so you're not talking about, oh, look at this feature is great, we can do X, Y, Z. No, that's not what you're talking about. You're talking about, I know you guys have problems with A, B, C. And I know these problems are causing X, Y, Z. And I know that is resulting in costs to the tune of this amount. And here's how my software is going to solve these problems for you. Here are the results and examples of companies that have completely eradicated these problems because of this software. Do you see what I'm saying? It's a totally different angle. You're giving the same information, but instead of talking about why this software is good, you're talking about why you can help them to be better. You explaining how you understand their key issues and you're showing them. So for example, when I'm working with a lot of big agencies, one of the problems with big agencies is that they don't hire someone in a role until someone has left that role. So we have a lot of retirements, right? And so they often will be hiring new people only after the other person has lost. And I now explain to them, okay, I want you all to think about how much money you're losing as that person knows they're going and they don't give a damn anymore, and you have a decrease in productivity. And then the entire time that you have no productivity because you're trying to recruit for the role, and then you ramp up while this person is now learning the role. Do you understand how much money your organization is losing in that time? It is a year's salary that you are losing. You are losing a year's salary to the organization. That's how much money the organization is losing. And so you have to recognize there's a huge need for that crossover. And for the 2 or 3 months that you're going to pay 2 salaries doesn't compare to the 1 year the salary is lost. That's totally different from me saying, well, it's good for the organization, for institutional knowledge, it's good for you, job satisfaction. All that is great. But when I start really explaining the problem they are having and how it's affecting their bottom line, organizations start thinking differently about the problem. So they now start saying, okay, so how can we change our policies? Do you see what I'm saying? So you have to think about what are the biggest problems the organization is facing that they want to get rid of, they want to eradicate, and then show how your software are going to address those problems. And that's going to help the sale of your software.
Great one. Just a quick follow-up to that. Like, how do you think they should go about figuring out their pricing? Yeah.
So the pricing piece is going to be important, right? The pricing piece is going to be difficult because you might want to do, you might have to do some price skimming, come in as high as possible, and then kind of negotiate with them. You can't come in too low, and you have to look at what other people are, I know Nigeria has a strong negotiation ethos, right? So you have to know, boy, when I'm negotiating with my Nigerians, I have to be on point, right? Because you all know your stuff when it comes to negotiating. So you have to know what the competition is charging for your software. You have to know what you do better than the competition, and then you have to be able to defend your price point. But I say start high and then come down slowly.
Okay, great, thank you. So we have a participant here asking, after creating a robust strategy for your brand marketing, including packaging, how do you prevent competitors with more money from just replicating it and capturing your target market?
So you can't control what your competitors do. You can never control what your competitors do, right? Mm-hmm. What you have to control is how you deliver value above and beyond what the competitors do. So, it is easy for people to copy what you do, but they can't copy you. Okay? So you have to find some component to your dynamic that is not replicable. And, you have to look at what is the personality part of it that cannot be replicated. And it might be a unique thing. It might be something. And I'll give you an example of my church. So my church, we have other, I'm Catholic. We have other Catholic churches around, but people will say, I came to y'all, it's in downtown. We don't have as many people living around us because it has now become urbanized. Man, I have to drive a little way out to you guys. I started going to a Catholic church close by me because a service is a service is a service. But I can't replicate the warmth that you guys give. So I keep coming back. I keep coming back to your church because I get the same mass, but I can't get the same warmth. There's something about you guys, about the service, about the people, about the music that is so warm that I can't get it anywhere else. That is our magic. That is the thing that's not replicable. So you have to figure out what is it that is replicable, that is not replicable, that you do in a unique way that they can't take from you.
Great, thank you very much, bro. Another person is asking, I run a digital marketing agency and we do a lot in web design, book editing, advertising, and many more. So right now we want to scale. How can we reach out to international clients and offer our services to a larger group? Secondly, talking about pricing, we have some clients who say they can pay, and sometimes we have to reduce the pricing so that they don't go away. So how can we convince them to pay without the brand compromising its price?
Well, first of all, I'll take the pricing first. First of all, the pricing, you always have to be competitive, right? And so one way to do that is to do bundle pricing, where just like I said, it's one thing if you nickel and dime me. So let's say I go somewhere and I get 5 services for $100, and I go somewhere else and I get 6 services for $100. So sometimes you have to do bundle pricing where, let me give you an example of and you have to do the bundle pricing based on what people value. So I'm going to pay, let's say, I don't know, $20 to go into the movie theater. The actual price of the movie is probably about $50 per person. So they're taking a huge hit on the price of the movie. But man, once I'm in there, they're going to get me on popcorn, because popcorn is costing me $10. It's only costing them cents, right? So what you have to recognize is, where can you make money? What services can you bump up on that you can make money? So what are the services that you make the most amount of profit on? And what are the services that people are most willing to pay for, right? You have to look at that calculation in your mind and say, man, people come to me and they always want to put together an ad. It is cheap for me to put together a digital ad. It's expensive for me to put together an online ad. It's cheap to put together an in-person TV ad. Is expensive. I'm going to push digital ads as much as possible, because that's where I make the most amount of money. That's where I can be most profitable. So it's not just about how can I adjust my pricing, but it is about recognizing what people value and where you have the most wiggle room in your pricing. So you don't mark up on everything. Some things you have a much bigger markup on than others. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you very much.
Now, but the front part is reaching the international clientele. Yeah. So there are two ways we reach an international clientele: proactive or reactive, right? The likelihood, so reactive means that someone comes to Nigeria and they interact with you and they say, boy, can you run my marketing in Trinidad? I love you guys. Can you come to Trinidad and do this for me? That is much more rare. Much more popular is I go out to, certain places and I say, okay, I want to do this and I want to go to this place. What I always say is closer is better at first. So in the US, two of our number one places that we do business with, Canada and Mexico, because that's closest, right? And so when you're going international, you have to think about two things: where you're going and how you're going. So I would always say, go to places that you're most familiar with first. Mm-hmm. Going international has a very high failure rate. So remember, I'm an international business professor. Very, very, three varies high failure rate. So play for what you know. So go to a destination that you are more familiar with, and then do your research on that destination and the customers and the laws and all those kind of things before you go into an international market, because that's a tricky one. But the important thing is to make sure that you do your homework and you pick a destination that you're most familiar with. Okay, next question.
Okay, great. So we have good afternoon, Prof. Detailed exposition and marketing. As a startup agricultural brand, which of these marketing strategies is more effective and efficient? Using a distribution company to sell and distribute my products, or sell and distribute my products myself? Okay.
Well, it all depends on what you want to do and how much time you have to do it. Now, a distribution company is not a substitute for you. You know your products best. You are the best representation of your brand. However, a distribution company knows the market better than you. Okay? So you know your company, you know your product, you know what you are selling better, but they know how to sell better. They know the market better. So it all depends on what you're trying to do and how much money you have to do it. What I always say is, if you have a lot of money, now the other problem with the distribution company is that they're distributing for you and a whole bunch of other people alongside. So they don't necessarily have your best interest all the time at heart, but they know the market. So what you might want to do is you might want to start off with the distribution company and then get a lot of intel from them and then do it yourself, right? Or you can do it the other way, start off yourself, and then when you really, but the thing is that I like the idea of doing it yourself. However, recognize that doing it yourself is going to take longer than if you go to a distribution company. And so that's why I'm saying there are pros and cons of either, because the distribution company knows the market in ways you don't. You don't have an understanding of the market, and you don't have the contacts in a retailing environment that they do. But because you know, so I would suggest you start off with them, and then you could take it from them. Once you get as much information about the distribution, you get to know your clients, then maybe you're in a stronger position to take it from them. But from the beginning, you don't know your market enough. You don't know your market enough.
Fantastic. And I mean, just to follow up with that, because I do know there have been a number of startups doing work like providing logistics service to farms and kind of like having online marketplaces where farms have to upload their commodities and then people come and buy. But I think there's always been this challenge around like the use of the technology. Some of these guys are not really used to using smartphones and all that. But I mean, there's a lot of potential with using the marketplace. So I mean, just following up, how might we develop that or market that to them to like use more online platforms when they are not traditionally used to it?
Again, we're talking about changing behavior. I remember changing behavior, Blessing, is the hardest thing to initiate in marketing, right? When you're getting to change culture and change people and change how they approach things, that's the hardest thing to do in marketing. So it's not going to be easy. And when we're talking about, particularly in older populations, because the farmers are aging populations, right? To get them to adopt this new, and that's why I'm saying distribution company, because I can tell you, I know distributors that have intimate relationships with their clients, where their clients believe anything and everything that they tell them, right? And so you are trying to get them to get rid of that relationship and go to this online platform. They're not likely to do that because they don't know you. They don't like the tech. Even if there is a benefit to them, you have to somehow engage with them on a personal basis and get them to understand on a personal basis the benefits of that. I think of using the platform. People before technology. Keep that always in mind. People before technology.
Yeah, thank you very much, Prof. We have a question here about can marketing strategies be made proprietary? If yes, how?
It's similar to what they say. There is no, you can't patent an idea, right? I think marketing strategies, I don't know how you're necessarily going to do intellectual property around that unless you can show that this is, you developed it specifically. I mean, it all depends. I don't know enough about the IP laws in Nigeria, et cetera, et cetera. But you can certainly develop it and try to keep it as secret as possible. But remember, people are going to find out, right? Your employees are going to know, et cetera, et cetera. So I think, there's a possibility of that. But it all depends on what are the laws in your location and how the laws protect IP. So I can't speak much to if they were proprietary.
Okay, good. Someone is asking, what's the most cost-effective marketing strategy for food processing businesses?
Boy, that's a very general question, right? I think, the big thing is knowing who your audience is, right? So if you're processing food, then your audience, I'm guessing, is a retailer supermarket, right? And so you have to think who's making the decision within the supermarket to put new products on the shelf? And then how can I best reach that person? Because what we know is that within an organization, even though more people make the decision, it's still a person, still a human being, right? So you have to figure out how to get to those human beings. Where can I reach them? Where are they going to be getting information, open to receiving information? So you have to think about who are these people. And some people take the approach where they're going face to face, but you might be able to access them. But think, and what I always say is think of a gateway. So what do I think of as a gateway? All right, so let me give you an example. When I was still a PhD student, the first semester that I had to teach a course, I asked the admin assistant in our department if she could let me know what text other professors were using, right? Because she was the one that took all the book orders. So rather than going to every single professor in the department and say, hey, what book are you using for intro to marketing? I said, hey, Janet, you take all the orders. What book is everyone using? And she told me, Kotler. Okay, so I said, okay, but that's what I'm going to use. Fast forward 2 years later, I'm in that office and I see the book rep for Pearson's, which is the book, the publisher for Kotler, come in and greet the admin assistant as if this is the long lost friend, right? She brings flowers and chocolates and she is doing a big to-do. And it occurs to me that Janet has a relationship with the publisher for Kotler, right? And that publisher figured out who was the gatekeeper of information and wooed that person to death and got an in. And so there might have been 50 other good books, but we were all using the same book because Janet told all of us that Kotler was the best book because she had a vested interest in doing that, right? She was the gatekeeper. We had no clue that she was the gatekeeper, but she was. And so I think a lot of it is really understanding who the gatekeeper is in an organization. And that person can be a very simple person. And that person could be so instrumental in getting your product in.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much, Prof. And I would like you to talk a little bit more about people before technology, because that's really hard. You know, especially we're very, most of us here are young people who are fascinated by really good products. We're fascinated by tech. We're fascinated by building things. And so we fall into the temptation of jumping into building things fast before even thinking about, you know, if the clients or the end users really wants to use it. So I would like you to throw more light around, you know, that topic, people for technology.
Boy, Blessing, that's huge. And I tell you, when I'm dealing with my engineers, that's their biggest downfall, that they put technology before people. So there's an entire category of people, of job called analysts now in the tech world that was built to translate technology to people speak, right? Because people who develop tech don't know how to deal with people. And often I always joke and say everything is not user error. So a lot of times people will say, well, the problem is the user. The problem is that you didn't build it with the user in mind, right? I think you cannot really sell a product purely based on the technology. You have to think about how the technology meets the needs of the human, how the human interacts with the technology, and where the technology has the potential to fail the human, and where the technology has the potential to make the human better. Okay, so for example, let's use this forum. And I think, you know, people are like, oh, wow, Zoom is incredible. It is a fabulous technology. But can I tell you, I've been on Zoom calls where I'm like, Jesus, please take me now, right? Because it is the most boring, the horrible, because these people just cannot engage in this, right? And I have been on Zoom calls where I'm like, damn, how long has passed? 2 hours are gone? Where is this is incredible. And everybody's engaging and everybody's talking from across the globe. This is amazing. So it's not the technology alone, it's how we engage with the technology and kind of how you develop, how you create technology that mimics human behavior, that is intuitive, that understands what the needs of the humans are. And so, for example, something very basic. So I worked at the Florida Chamber of Commerce, and they had a piece of software where they needed to look up their members. They could only look up members based on member number. They're like, we don't talk about members based on, oh, that was member 365. We talk about members based on, oh, that was Blessing. Oh, that was Sacha. That was Mr. George. So why would we create a technology that looks up members by member number? It was horrible for them. Do you see that? Something as simple as that. The person looking up, person creating the technology was like, okay, they could look it up by member number because all the members have a member number. Indeed, they all do, but nobody uses it, right? Nobody uses it. And so how do we think? And is that intuitive? So I think the people before tech. And then the other thing is that nobody wants to think that they're being replaced by tech. And a lot of times, you don't want technology that forces you to use 10 steps when in reality you only use 6 steps when you think of how you do something. So people before technology, not that we're not using tech, but when we develop tech, we think really intimately of who's going to be using it, what they're going to be using it for, how they've been doing it before there was tech, and how we can mirror and improve on it in a tech environment.
Yeah, wow. Thank you so much, Professor Sacha. It's been a wonderful time with you. I know we still have other questions, I think, from someone, but hopefully
we have a few more minutes. We have a few more minutes. I don't mind, a couple other questions before we wrap up.
Sure. Okay, okay, good. We have someone here asking, being a startup interested in delivering food and market items to individuals in their homes, that's busy full-time workers, what do you suggest as an effective marketing strategy? And how can we set up a consistent pricing system, as that seems to be a challenge because of not having a constant markets for supplies?
Well, 2 things. One, you have to really know who your audience is, right? So you have to really kind of figure out who the people are, where they are. So it might be that you don't want to go, if you're delivering food, you don't want to be all over, right? Because maybe you don't have the capacity to be all over. So you have to really get a sense of where is the demand in terms of a geographical location, and try to center it, because otherwise you're going to be going too many different places and you may not have the capacity for that. The other thing is, boy, you need to understand who your consumer is intimately. I remember at one point in time, we talked about their marginal consumers and then there are really profitable consumers. So you're going to have consumers that are heavy users. That's your bread and butter. You need to really make sure you understand them and you provide for them. And don't try to dilute your consumer base by thinking about, well, how can I provide for those consumers who might only buy me once or twice? And then you can provide for them, but not at the expense of your bread and butter. So when you are creating this marketing strategy, you're thinking of who your core customer elements are and who your peripheral or marginal customers are, but make sure that anything you do for your marginal customers must not affect how you interact with your core customers. That's the main thing. And so if I buy 5, 6, 10 different types of items from you, you need to be available for me in ways that are important, because I don't want to know that you are up here selling one loaf of bread to this consumer and I can't get to buy my 10 things that I buy from you, right? So that's very important that you understand how you're going to treat with your different consumer bases. But also, be creative in terms of how you reach them, because there are some consumers that lend themselves to tech, right? So that you can have online, a WhatsApp group, and you let them put in their WhatsApp messages and WhatsApp you orders the night before, et cetera, but you can also have an online ordering system, right? But you also have a group of consumers that you have to call, because they are not going to call you, or they're not going to be awkward with a WhatsApp system, right? And they're certainly not going to go on the internet, but they will buy. So you have to be flexible in terms of how you reach them. But whatever marketing strategy you use, it has to be personal. And I would say WhatsApp messaging might be really effective, but of course you have to have numbers. So you want in a marketing strategy where you're doing food delivery, you need some way to do proximity marketing. You need to put up advertising in local centers, places that these people go to on a daily basis. If people are now in COVID time and on lockdown, you go door to door and you put out flyers, or you get the word out. You send to key community members, you send WhatsApp information to them and ask them to share it with friends, right? And you give incentives for people to share. If the first time you buy from us, your the person who recommends you gets 10% off, you get 10% off. So you need initiatives that encourage sharing, that encourage people to spread the word amongst the group.
Oh, thank you. I have someone here who is asking that he's built a software for record keeping again for nurses, but most of these nurses are really not used to technology, and they don't just see the value of using this software, even though it's really going to help them and their work. How might we get customers to adopt these new products?
Sit with a nurse and get a sense of what their biggest problems are. Sit with a nurse and get a sense of, on a day-to-day basis, what are the biggest challenges that they have? What are the biggest challenges the hospital has? And then market your program based on those points. Just like what I said before, you're not focusing on what you can do perfect, you're focusing on what they need you to do well, right? And so sit with a nurse and get a very intimate sense of, on a day-to-day, what their biggest challenges are and what the hospital grapples with the most and what is costing the hospital the most amount of money. Come up with a campaign around those points. Okay.
And then finally, Prof, I'd like you to talk about what business opportunities should people be looking at right now? New business opportunities should people really be looking at right now?
Well, I think because of these COVID times, it's going to change how we do business even after COVID, right? There's some things that are going to permanently change. I think you're going to have a lot more online instruction. I think you're going to have a lot more telehealth. I think you're going to have a lot more entertainment options at home, because I'm telling you, for at least the next year, maybe two, people are not going to want to be in close proximity to other people if they can avoid it, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think businesses that are able to transition things to an online environment have potential. But again, as they're developing these businesses, they have to think about people before tech, right? So I know, for example, in Trinidad, what has become a really big thing is the supermarkets having curbside pickup. But instead of having it online and you ordering online, which is the way it is in the US, it's all done via WhatsApp, right? Or you can call it in. And so you have, because they understand who the people are. The people who are doing these things they can't go online and navigate, even as simple as it is. It's not, and so they may have a dual approach. For the people that can navigate online, they have an online platform, but they also have a WhatsApp group you can send messages in. And they also have a hotline that you can call and talk to someone and get your list. And then they bring it out, and they are so personable. When they bring it out, in the US, when they bring it out, they put it in your trunk. Okay, thanks. But because that's the client, right? But in Trinidad, they're like, so thank you so much I'm so sorry. If there's anything else that we could get you, I know last minute you might have decided that you want to cook something different. Is there anything they come out before they do the order and say, we're coming out with it, but we just wanted to know anything on the menu today that you didn't remember that you want me to just add to it? Because they understand the culture. So people before tech. So think of whether it's groceries or fruits or entertainment or video, whatever it is, you doing a service, door-to-door haircuts or door-to-door nails or whatever it is, it's looking at how the whole convenient, because I'm telling you, I don't know when again the sharing economy is going to come back. I don't know when people are going to feel comfortable sleeping in other people's beds and riding in other people's cars. I don't know when the sharing economy is going to come back. And that was such a huge producer of jobs and supplementer of income. So I think we have to really revolutionize and rethink how we do business. And so a lot of that sector that is able to think about convenience in the home is going to be thriving.
Thank you very much, Prof.
Thank you so much.
For the opportunity to have you on this call. I hope we can do this again. And
yes.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so We'll talk shortly.
Thank you so much for having it, and thank you everyone for joining us. I really enjoyed it. I know it was a short, it went like that, right? But I love doing these things, and thank you so much for giving me the opportunity, and I hope everyone enjoyed and really benefited from this session. It's crazy times here. I have so much going on between teaching online courses and homeschooling these kids that I have upstairs, but I'm glad I was able to do this, and I hope people were able to benefit it. Thank you so much. Take care.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Guys, bye. We're going to send out emails with links to the videos, so just look out for them, and you get everything today. Prof, would you like to share your slides?
I'm happy to share my slides. Would you like me to email them to you, or?
Yes, that would be great. So
I'll email them to you so that you can have it for everyone to share. Okay?
Yes.
Take care. Be safe. Okay then.
Okay. Everybody, bye.
Bye.